Hi everyone, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my Psy-Changeling tier ranking video. So this is a little bit different. I am pre-recording this in StreamYard just so I can stream my screen and still have my face on camera. And it's kind of my first time doing it, so hopefully the technical side of this will work reasonably well. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. For those of you who are new to my channel, I have spent the last 12 months recapping and reviewing the entire series. The link to that playlist will be down below. But for now, I thought I would just go back over all of the books, which there are 22 in total, and share my rankings for them. And my rankings are kind of arbitrary because I basically judge books these days by whether I would reread them, which pretty much makes them an all-time favorite, or whether they're sort of an average book, and average for me is perfectly fine. So I'll show you my tier ranking format and you guys can judge whether or not it's something that's useful for you. And if you'd like to have a go at it yourself, there'll be a link for that down below. Obviously, I am pre-recording this. I'm not going to do too many edits on it, but hopefully we'll get through this in relatively one piece. All right, so I am going to share my screen. A lot of people have made tier ranking videos in the past, and I've had a go at them as well, but I haven't filmed any of them. So I thought it would just be kind of fun to wrap up this series. Okay, let's see if I can get rid of some of these for now. Okay. So as I said, there are currently 22 books in the series, and the books start with Slave to Sensation. The most recent book is Last Guard. Wild Imitation and Wild Embrace are two anthology collections. My rankings are up the top, my all-time favorites. These are books that I will reread time and time again, regardless of whether I'm reading the entire series. There are my definite rereads, things that aren't quite my favorites and may not be the books that I would reach for if I wanted to say a comfort read in that all-time favorite category, but are still things that I would like to pick up every now and then. There are my great stories, the average ones, and then my least favorites, which there aren't too many of them in the series, and I don't think I gave anything less than sort of a 3-star anyway. So, I mean, that gives you a rough understanding of where it is. I won't be sharing my star ratings for these books. I'll use these categories. I think it's just a little bit easier. All right, so if we start with Slave to Sensation, I think it's a great story. It's definitely not one of my favorites in the series. I like Sasha and Lucas, but again, they're not one of my favorite couples, and they pop up every now and then, so I like seeing them, but it's not something that goes into my reread collection. It's no secret Visions of Heat is one of my least favorite books in the series. I don't like the power imbalance between the two main characters. Excuse me. I think it's really interesting. Vaughn is a very, very alpha character. And interestingly enough, later in the series, when we meet him again, I like him a lot more. But in this particular book, I really, really struggled with him. Again, no surprise, Caressed by Ice is an all-time favorite. It's probably my nostalgic all-time favorite book of the series. There's quite a few other books that go up here now. But yeah, Judd is my favorite. I am that person who tracked him the entire way through the series. So if you want to know where a Judd reference is in any of the other books, come and let me know because I've got them marked. But Judd and Brenna's story is one of my favorites. And this was the one that truly hooked me into the series. So it definitely deserves its title in the all-time favorites. Mine to Possess is another one that I'm going to pop in least favorites. This was Clay and Talon's story, and it's not that it was a bad book. It's just not one that particularly gripped me. I wasn't a huge fan of Clay and Talon as characters, although a lot of their book does tie in to some of the greater world building stuff that goes on. So yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where I definitely enjoyed it, but it's not one that I would reach for to reread unless I was rereading the entire series. Hostage to Pleasure goes in my great stories. I really like Ashaya as the heroine in this book. Dorian can be a little bit all over the page, but I did like him more upon reread. But Ashaya was the standout in this book for me. Same thing with Branded by Fire. This one is hot. It's probably the steamiest book right from the get-go in all of the series because it's the first book that is a changeling relationship. This one is Riley and Mercy's book. and I love them. I love them as they pop up the whole way through the series. But yeah, it's definitely a really great story in this series. Blaze of Memory is probably an average story for me. Perfectly fine. It's definitely not one I would reach for to reread. This one is Katia and Dev's story, so suddenly we're stepping outside of our main packs, which is possibly why my rating goes there, because I love spending time with either the Arrows, the Snow Dancers, or every now and then the Dark River pack. I think I have to put Bonds of Justice in the same category, which I was sort of umming and ahhing about whether or not to bump it up into the next category. But I think ultimately this story sort of stands on its own a little bit. So you could pick this one up if you wanted to. I really started to enjoy Sophia's character the second time around. But there was, just something missing for me in this book. Play of Passion is another really great story. This one is Indigo and Drew's story. And I love the playfulness in this one. Drew really goes well out of his way to try and court Indigo, who is not having it for the time being. There is a little bit of an age gap it's barely significant, but Indigo is the older of the two of them. And a lot of that causes sort of her reluctance initially to get involved in the relationship, plus the issue around dominance between two changeling characters. Then we come to Kiss of Snow, which is Hawk and Sienna's book, and that is a definite reread for me. I love this book. This is an age gap. There's about 10 years between Sienna and Hawk is the alpha of the Snow Dancer pack, and Sienna is a very, very powerful Psy. It's such a good story. It is one of my favorites, definitely, but doesn't quite hit the same mark as a couple of the ones that are going in the all-time favorites, and you'll possibly see why later on. Tangle of Need is Riaz and, Adria's book. I know a lot of people struggle with this book. I personally enjoyed it on reread, but I can say that it's not going to be one for everyone, because you're not spending a whole lot of time with characters we've spent time with before, so perhaps some of that connection is lost. And also, these two are constantly at each other. It's very much a hate to love sort of relationship, and it does play around a little bit with the fated mates trope and what happens when you can't be with your fated mate. So from that perspective, I found that really interesting. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it more than something like Visions of Heat, but I can see why other people wouldn't enjoy it as much. Heart of Obsidian goes up here with my all-time favorites. It is a really great morality chain story. Caleb is just a character that I have loved reading about the whole way through the series. He has close ties with Judge. So really Caleb story sort of kicks off in book 2. He is mentioned in book 1, I'm pretty sure, but his story kicks off in book 2, and so we finally get the culmination of his story in book 12, and then he just pops up as a major player all the time in the rest of the books, which is really great. Shield of Winter is Basic and Ivy Jane's book. Really enjoyable story. We learn a little bit more about the empaths in this book, and we also learn a little bit more about the Arrows, because it's the first time we've spent time with an active Arrow. Basic is the teleporter, and he has also been in the books in and out for pretty much the entire series, but we only sort of start learning his name in books closer to Shield of Winter. Shards of Hope, again, another great story. This one is Aiden Kai's story, and oh my gosh, why have I forgotten her name? Oh, that's bad. Zyra. Oh my gosh, mental blank. So yes, that was Aiden and Zyra's story, and I really enjoyed that because we spent a huge amount of time with Rainfire, which is another pack, and I liked seeing the struggle that Aiden had trying to change the perception of the arrows, and also he has a really awesome power that you kind of don't see coming. So really interesting story. And Allegiance of Honor, I think, has to go back into, do I put it in rereads? There's a lot of things that happen in this book. I might put it in rereads because we get so many different interconnected stories in this one, because it's sort of culminating the first season of the Psy-Changeling books. So it's wrapping up a lot of loose threads. I mean, and I can't say anything bad because it's the book where we get the birth of the pup cubs and the giant party at the end with everyone, which was just really nice. Also, you get to see Caleb interacting with everyone else, including some of the changelings, and it's hilarious. Silver Silence is the first book in the Psy-Trinity series, and that is an all-time favorite. It is Silver Mercant's relationship with Valentin, who is one of the Stonewater Bears in Russia, and the bears are arguably in dual first place as my favorite pack with the Snowdancer wolves, because the bears are just hilarious. I mean, they'd be up here for all-time favorites just for the phrase baby bear gangsters and the tiny bear cubs who run around causing mischief. But the story itself is a really great one, and I like the relationship between Valentin and Silver. Oceanlight goes here in great stories. I did really enjoy this on reread, although arguably it's probably my least favorite of the Psy-Trinity books, but that's not saying much. This one is really awesome because we spend so much time with the Black Sea shifters, and all I wanted from the end of this book was to know what Malachi and Mian shifted into. And I would really, really like their book because there's something going on with those two. Wolf Rain is a definite reread for me. I absolutely loved the relationship between Alexi and Memory. She was just such a fiery, kick-ass heroine, and she doesn't put up with any of his broody behavior because he's a bit of a grump at the start of the book, but I absolutely love that one. Alpha Knight is an all-time favorite. This one is a relationship between the female alpha of the Black Edge Wolf clan in Russia and an arrow who has an interesting power for an arrow. And by the time you get to the end of the story, I was just so invested in their book. So yeah, all-time favorite. Last Guard is a definite reread for me. I love the fact that we spend time with the anchors. I love that Kanto and Payal are really evenly matched in terms of personality and dominance, and they have this connection from childhood, so they are the person that each other trusts. I will say that the ending does feel a little bit rushed, but to be perfectly honest, I feel like the story ended after they solved one of the problems that they were trying to solve, and that everything that came after it was just wrapping up. So the rushed ending didn't bother me so much because I sort of got the payoff for what I wanted with everything else. And then the last two books are Wild Invitation and Wild Embrace, which are the novella anthologies. I think Wild Invitation is a definite reread. This one has a very Christmas-themed feel to the story, or to the stories, I should say. So each story sort of takes place loosely with a bit of a Christmas theme, but the stories inside it are amazing, and it's worth it just for the story that shows how Tamsin and Nate got together. And Tamsin is the healer for the Dark River Leopards, and her story is great. And then Wild Embrace is another great collection. It shows a whole lot of different characters, including some of the Snowdancer lieutenants that we don't spend a huge amount of time with on page, but we get their stories in here, and I really enjoyed that. All right, so that is my tier ranking of the Psy-Changeling books. I'd love to know how you would rank them. Everyone's, perception and the way that they view these books are going to be different, and that's totally fine. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. These are just personal rankings, and I think the series means so much to me, and particular books have particular significance to me just for when I first read them or when I reread them, how I was feeling at the time. So at the moment, this is where the sort of current ranking stands. In the comments, let me know what you would put or where, or even just pick one book and say where you would put it. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy. and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.